Go for it.
Comment, bienvenue. Apologies for the late starting of today's podcast. Here we are, Property Matters, with myself, Gareth Wax, and Hamish McLeod of Search and Convey, where we toss around all the ideas that are happening going on in the property world right now. And one of the things that seems to be dominating is all talk of cladding and associated matters. And apparently, it's even past the legacy of Grenfell, property standards are still being ignored. Hamish, would you get us going, please?
Right, it does seem very appropriate. We're actually call it still below standard. Still below standard. And what we're actually speaking about, the quality of build of properties, can at this particular moment in time, they are not guaranteed. You go and buy a car, you have a warranty, amongst many other things,
right?
And you know that that's going to be all right, and it's going to be fixed, and that they maintain they will fix it. Now, rarely does it happen that it can't. If anything else, at least they'll replace the car. They can't replace a property. Now, one of the aspects of Grenfell, when Grenfell actually sort of came out, it did actually reveal, not just in high-rise flats, not just in low-rise flats, but in property sort of generally, the standards of build that we'd accepted as being perfectly reasonable over time, it turned out not to be the case, because builders have been cutting corners for years and years, but we didn't know about it. And it was only when they started pulling things like the cladding off, when they started investigating Grenfell for starters, that they realized what was beneath the cladding. It's easier on a building that has cladding, you can pull the cladding off and see what's underneath, but a conventional building, you can't actually tell. However, you speak to some people today who are moving into new build properties. They're brand new properties. Nobody else has been in them. That property is ready for that person to move into, allegedly. But the number of faults that are found within those properties. Now, we've had Building Safety Act. We've had all sorts of various things. We've had regulators put here and all the rest of it. But there is still yet no guarantee that when somebody says, I've built you a house and it's safe, that they're actually telling the truth.
It just seems to be bizarre in this day and age, where it's all a bit about fire safety and prevention of harm to life and all that. We're in mid heightened tensions about this very topic. Yet when we peel back the cladding on so many properties, you find that it's been, I think the expression slapdash is appropriate, that the appropriate precautions haven't been taken to make sure that property is coming out tip top for whoever the new dweller is. That when you buy a property that's off the shelf, as it were, you'd expect to have no faults for years. Am I wrong in thinking that, Hamish?
Well, actually, no. And when we have comments of some councils, and we know one in particular, Greenwich Council, where the head councillor, I don't know what we call a head councillor, but he actually has the audacity to say things like, it is our responsibility to look after the safety of our residents. And then in actual fact turned his back on the safety of his residents by suggesting there aren't any risks in a property which has been proven goodness knows how many times to have defaults right from the very, very start of the build. But the strange thing is, we don't have, one would assume that you've got a building regulator. He's the overall one, you put your plans through. Now they've decided to tighten up on this. Oh, they should have tightened up on this. But the regulator is apparently, because of the limit, because of the additional work required, there aren't enough regulators to carry out the work. So there's a backload. There's a call now for, hey, look, we don't want to be doing this over much now because it's taking too long for this to be checked out. Now, the builders brought this on themselves because the builders themselves contradicted everybody's belief themselves by actually creating unsafe buildings, particularly with those high-rise flats, but also the quality of build of just houses generally. And people now no longer can rely on building control to actually sort of say that this is perfectly adequate, because the building control on many, many properties is saying, yeah, that's all right, that's all right. And then there's so many defaults being found. And the building control, oh, what's that? That's nothing to do with us. What we've done with sort of, we put the wrong cookies in, it's nothing to do with us. And okay, it probably isn't anything to do with us, but it's something else to be sorted out. But I just threw that in just for the hell of it, because that is something which is actually found to be the case.
It does appear to be more grist to the mill. I mean, you'd have thought that with all of this kind of stuff being quite high profile at the moment, that builders would be falling over themselves to prove just how safe their buildings are.
Well, one would have thought so, because the quality of their product, one would have thought, would have carried their name through.
Yeah.
Now, we know that there's only one master builder in the United Kingdom, as nominated by the government.
Right.
That's Barratt's. But we know that, in fact, Barratt's, in fairness, they're probably only about the 5th or 6th worst builder.
But still, even at 5th or 6th worst, 35% of their properties are technically unlivable in. They are not fire safe.
You're exaggerating. Gareth, you're exaggerating. It's only 30%.
I'm sorry. I'll give them the 5.
Good. I'm glad of that. I'd hate to put the wrong label upon them. However, they're not the happiest of people about changing the standard of certain things that they have built. But that's not really what was the major concern that we have. What we've got, and it's important, and I think we need to keep reiterating this. Netflix themselves are putting the final touches to a documentary film, which is being brought out because it's on the 14th of June when the fire broke out at sort of Grenfell.
I'm looking forward to seeing that, and also what the aftermath will be. Yes.
So the film is being put out by Netflix, and we know what Netflix is like. They're going to be promoting it like all get out. And I think every single councillor throughout every single council in England and Wales and Scotland and Ireland, and probably throughout the world, should sit down and look at that particular sort of film and find out that they have a responsibility. Now, that it's not just the council that have a responsibility, it's building control that have a responsibility, the regulator, the builder, the developer. All of these people, even the people on the ground who are actually building properties, have a responsibility. And it's so very, very easy. Oh, it's just a brick I'm putting up. No, it's a brick that's responsible for the safety and protection of somebody who's going to live within that dwelling. And it's just, there seems to be this whole attitude is, let's cut corners. Let's get as many bricks up as we can. Are they being put up safely? Have we got the right safeguards there? Have we got the right gaps between the walls? Are we using the cheapest material? Are we using appropriate material? And really, these things aren't being done. There's so many people who actually contribute to a building, the completion of a building, yet so many of them are falling by the wayside. And one would expect the council at least to turn around and say, hey, look, this is not up to scratch. Now, we have found that, yes, they'll do that about some of the buildings, but the ones that matter, they're not actually sort of saying it. But it's an attitude of mind that needs to change. There needs to be some regulation, and that regulation needs to be somehow or other checked over, because at the moment, the regulations exist, but people don't necessarily need to actually sort of carry out what the regulation says. or that is what builders are demonstrating to be the case. How do we change the attitude of mind of a country which persists in building under, if you like, undervalued property and trying to charge the earth for it?
It's incredible. Here we have the big push right on now. Well, theoretically, the last 3 governments, but the big push: build more houses, build more building stock. But there is no other than Steve and the building safety scheme.org. Nobody's really pulling up the banner that says we must make sure that the quality of these new builds is up to par. I think I'm surprised more isn't made of that. I mean, yes, cladding, obviously, but underneath the cladding, a whole host of ills can reside.
And I think when we actually look at this, and this we've got a challenge anyway, because the number of buildings that need remediating, the sadness is it's an accepted part by both councils, by the councillors who haven't yet seen this documentary, which I hope they watch, by government, by a number of people who are responsible for these particular things, that they're bypassing what really needs to be looked at.
Right.
And what you do, and it is possible, and it's sort of demonstrated. One of our colleagues, who we'll see in a couple of weeks' time again, Michelle, who comes up and joins us for construction news, she is one of those that actually does go out onto building sites and she checks. She doesn't tell people she's turning up. She'll turn up and she'll actually look and see what's going on. And that's really what building control should be about. We should have far more people qualified out there in the field. If this is where we're failing, there should be far more people out there in the field checking out
right
the state of these particular sort of buildings, because at the moment it doesn't seem to be a way of redressing this situation and getting the balance right. We cannot. There is no point in building 1.5 million homes if we've got 3 million of them that need to be remediated. I mean, we're still in negative, and we still do have that. We don't know how many need remediation because we haven't checked every single one out. They keep it'll be all right if it's 18 meters. If it's above 18 meters, it needs to be. What about those below 18 meters? And they're purposely building now below 18 meters. Let's build it at 17.9 or 17.8. Then we can get away from that.
Well, that's basically what's going on, isn't it? Really?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So we're not getting. So how are we going to regulate this particular sort of aspect? And this is really what I'm trying to actually sort of ask. And it really, with it being so close to 8 years since they haven't been able to establish who was responsible, although there's a big finger or a number of hands pointing at councillors right the way through this. They are, if you like, they're perhaps the last core, but they can turn around. And they've done it in Greenwich. They did it with one of the properties and said, "Oh, thou shalt not move in." Guess what? The developer got them all moved in. And of course, everybody's screaming, "No, you can't move them out again. Where are we going to move them?" The council is going to be responsible for maintaining them, looking after them. We need a standard that people can rely on. We need a standard that people know that they're moving into sort of something safe. And until such time, and we do know it's sort of scattered. The top 10 builders turnover-wise, 7 of those are probably the worst in the country. I say probably. It's not definitely. Steve Day would actually be able to tell us in terms of the safety risk aspect, but we don't have the peak figures on the poor quality of those particular sort of completed properties. But we do have so many people complaining about the standards that the standard of the build when they actually sort of move into the property, because many people will buy a property off plan, and we say off plan, it's meant to be built the way it's planned. However, builders can sometimes change that plan.
Yes.
they've done, as we actually sort of found out, with the let's move a window. We won't put it where we said we put it somewhere else. So it's not actually being provided off the plan that was submitted to the purchaser. It's a bit like sort of saying, well, I know the car you looked at had a wheel on the right hand side of the vehicle. We put it on the left. It doesn't matter. It doesn't actually matter. But I mean, it's a bit like that. Or it's a bit of saying, well, actually, we didn't worry about putting the rear axle on properly. There was no point in doing that because we know the front axle works. And you look at that one, then it's all sorts of aspects of that particular kind of building, which is sort of going on. But because nobody noticed, nobody actually sort of noticed what was sort of.
Well, it's because this use of cladding almost universally now means that it doesn't matter how much of a mess it is, plastic bags left in there, bottles of this or whatever rubbish has been left behind, anything could be underneath that cladding. And it's only when you lift it off that you actually see the true state of the building infrastructure underneath. Before we wind this up to a close, Hamish, would you at least take us home, please?
Well, what we have to try and do is to look and see what transparency can be brought into the build process. And this is one of the reasons why we put these particular types of programs out, why we put these sessions out, is to try and get people to actually come back and feed us with the right information, make people aware out there that, hey, look, everything isn't rosy. It isn't like the council is saying. It isn't like the government is saying. The housing program is falling far short in terms of two things. First of all, we have nothing like the volume happening, but right. More importantly, the quality is not yet being guaranteed, and nobody is actually out there turning around saying, we're doing it at last. It's something that is going to be viewed and will be looked at, but it's not happening.
But I would say, as a challenge to all of you builders out there, and I know some of you are watching, here's the challenge for you to rise above the rest. If you were to be able to build to that high quality and give a guarantee, how much better would you stand in the eyes of the public? Surely that would make you a much better quantity to put your time and effort into. But that's just my thoughts. Hamish McClay, thank you so much. As ever, we put out these podcasts really to prod you all into greater critical thinking, not just taking the line that perhaps a council might throw you and swallowing it hook, line, and sinker, but instead criticizing and thinking, is this as it seems? Maybe I need to think about it still further. Thank you, Hamish. And to all of you watching, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and let's look after each other's mental health. Until next week, goodbye.